This MVU virtual event is going to cover how to set up a secure U2 REST server. And once again, I'm your speaker, Mike Belmy. Resources you'll need to follow along with this one, mainly just the link to the product matrix where you can get the latest U2DB tools release. You probably want Xadmin from that for setting up SSL on the server side. And then going to do some demos with the RESTful Web Services developer from the DB tools. Another related tool might be the U2 Certificate Management tool. That one's found in the U2 Common Clients, also available for free from the product matrix. So a lot of this demo and presentations going to assume you have some basic understanding of the following items here. Be how to create a U2 REST server, also connect it to a U2 database, and then set up SSL for either the UVCS or UDCS service on the server side. Also some knowledge of how to use Java and the key tool utility, how to configure openssl, and create and acquire certificates and private keys. A lot of this can be found in my other sessions. So the prerequisite installs here for the demo, going to be openssl installed and Java installed. That can be either OpenJDK or Oracle Java, whichever you prefer. U2 RESTful Web Services developer, or you can use the newer Rocket Multi-Value Integration Server, so MVIS. REST works pretty much the same in both of those tools, so up to you what you want to use. I'm going to be demoing using OpenJDK today simply because that's what most of our products are using for Java now, since Oracle moved to a paid licensing model, and I'm going to be using U2 REST. These are the steps I'm going to cover in the demo in a few minutes. To secure the client to the REST server, so this would be like a web browser using HTTPS to connect to your REST server. First, create the PKCS12 store, or that's a Microsoft certificate store, using OpenSSL. So inside that store, you're going to want your certificate for the REST server, and then also the private key, since this is going to be your SSL server. Next, you'll be importing that PKCS12 store into a Java key store, or JKS. We're going to do that with key tool, and the final step, you just point that REST server to Java key store file and use that checkbox right there for use SSL. We'll enter your passwords for the key store and private key inside. Next step, if you want end-to-end security, which would be SSL between the client and REST server, and then SSL between the REST server and the actual U2 database. So the next step in that is actually securing the REST server connection to the database. To do that, either you'll be importing a copy of your server certificate. That's probably more if you're using a self-signed certificate. Otherwise, it'll be just a copy of the root certificate that signs that server certificate. I'm talking about the U2 server certificate. That may or may not be the same server as your REST server. So we're going to take a copy of that and import that. At least in my demo, I'm going to import that into the standard Java trust store, which is the CA certs file. Beyond that, just point the REST resource to use the Java trust store and enable SSL, just like the last step. I'm going to show you how to actually go through all the steps I covered and secure the U2 REST client connections, and then secure the U2 REST connection to a U2 server. Alright, I've got U2 RESTful Web Services developer installed. This is version 464.1, the very latest from the 441 U2 DB Tools package. So I've already set up a couple servers here. The remote server this REST server I've already created is going to connect to is this dendev mvdt mj102 server. That's, I believe, running Universe 11.3.2 on Windows, and I've already set up on that end SSL for the UVCS service, which is what our U2 REST servers connect through, using UniObjects for Java connection actually. So first I'm going to go ahead and show you how to secure the connection from the REST server itself to the backend U2 database. First item to do there is we're going to be importing a copy of the root certificate that signed the remote U2 server certificate into a Java key store, or a trust store I guess you'd call this. So the one I'm going to use is, let's see, I'm using OpenJDK here, an install of OpenJDK. So let's see if I can show you the full path there. C program files, OpenJDK build, and if I go up a couple levels here, we're going to go into the JRE, lib, and security. And by default, Java uses this CA certs file as its trust store, just kind of like any web browser would. They have a trust store full of pre-populated root certificates, CA signed root certificates. If you're doing something self-signed, you'll probably add the self-signed certificate for the remote server itself. By remote, I mean the U2 server on the back end, into this CA certs file. I have kind of a self-signed root certificate and then a server certificate, so just the root certificate should be plenty since it signs the server certificate here. Let me bring it into that window. I have a directory here. This is a copy of the root certificate, and that's the server certificate for the remote server where the U2 database is. So basically I'm just going to import a copy of this using key tool. And I do have the Java, I believe, bin path already set, so key tool should work without, yep, so it should work without putting in a full path for key tool, though it would be to that Java bin directory is where that's found. So the command here I'm going to use key tool minus import cert minus file, and we'll use double quotes and give it the path to this root certificate and the file name. I'm sorry, I've been pointing to the wrong one the whole time. That's the private key. This is the root actual certificate file. So if we look at that, just rocket test root. Not much for details. So that's the one I'm going to be importing. So root.cer, and let's see what other, so minus alias. This is just wrapping to the next line. This is all the same command though. And I'll give it an alias, just rocket root cert. And minus key store. We're going to give it the full path to the, so this is the key store I want to import this root certificate file into. So that's going to be this path to the JRE lib security CA certs file. Okay, that should be it. And so this is the Java just standard trust store, so their standard default password on that is changeit, CHANGEIT, all one word. Just asks, well, gives you some of the details of the certificate, and then asks if you trust this. If you say yes, it should import it. So it's been added to the key store. And actually, to secure the REST server to the U2 server, we're going to select the data resource that you want to secure, the data resource that actually connects to the backend U2 server, not the REST server itself. So we right-click that, Properties, This is already set. We'll click Next. Here's the page where you set up SSL, so check Use SSL. If you check this box, it should be using, as it says, the JRE home lib security ca certs file. I'm just going to enter the path anyway for it, just to be sure that's the same Java install we're talking about. So C program files. And we'll select the ca certs file. And again, the password, change it in lowercase, all one word. Finish. So that's it really. We'll go ahead and start the REST server. And we can test a request through there. Just double click the customer resource. Sometimes it takes a second. There we go, second try. Okay, that looks good. So I actually have a remote desktop session open here in another window I'm bringing up. And I'll show you how to actually verify that it is connected with SSL. So I've turned on server debug logging. This is on the U2 server side in the UV home or UDT home. Server debug right there. So just adding the server debug file to the UV home or UDT home. So this is all that's actually in there. Just the service name, space 10, space, and then the log path and log name. So what that does is create a log file over in the temp directory, and you're looking for one with SSL in the name. When you have SSL enabled, you get two logs, one for the SSL connection, one for the regular UVCS logging. So if we look at this in Notepad here, if we scroll down, to the bottom here, really this section is what's important. We see it started the SSL handshake and it's done. Connected with TLS v1.2 protocol, SSL handshake is successful. So that's it for the REST server to the U2 database. The next piece is securing the other end, the client or web browser, to the actual U2 REST server so that we can use HTTPS here in the URL. So I'm going to close that. So for this, again, we'll be using actually openssl and keytool to do this end. I'm going to go ahead and stop the REST server. And I'll show you the certificates I have ready. So since the U2 REST server is a different machine from the actual U2 database server, it's a different certificate. We're actually going to need the private key and the server certificate to create an SSL server out of the REST server. So that'll be this copy here. That's the machine name I'm on, where the REST server resides, and it actually shares a private key with the root certificate here. So this is the private key file I'll be adding. We're going to use openssl to create actually a PKCS12 Microsoft key store first, and then we're going to import that into a Java key store once it's ready. So first commands here. Again, I have UDT home or UV home in my path, so that's why I can just type openssl and it works. So here's the command we're going to be using: openssl pkcs12 -export -in. And this is where we give it the certificate name for the U2 REST server, path and name. So I'll copy the path here, paste that, and I believe that's the certificate name right there. Not quite done. So the next option, -in key, and this is where you enter the path for and the name of the private key here. So mine's in this case just root.pem. Root.pem. And the next step, -out. And so this will be the out key store we make. I'm just going to name it keystore.p12 since this is now a pkcs12 key store. And then -name, which is like an alias. So we'll just give it rest SSL server. That should be it. So it's asking for the password to the private key here. So I'll enter that password. And now a password to export to the pkcs12 file. I'm going to just make these the same so it doesn't get confusing in a minute here. You'll see why. And type it one more time. So if that worked, and it looks like it did, we now have a keystore.p12 file here. That's in a Microsoft format. I'm going to go ahead now and use keytool to import that into a Java key store that we can then plug into the REST server as an SSL service. So keytool -import keystore -source src keystore. Even though we're in that directory, I'll give it the full path. And it was named keystore.p12. And so what's next? We need -src source store type, and that is pkcs12 -destination key store, and we'll give it the path again and just my Java keystore.jks. So that's the destination output. Okay, so more passwords involved. This will be for the JKS file. This is where it's easier to keep the password the same for everything. Enter it again. Enter the source key store password, meaning the pkcs12 file. Okay, successfully imported. Looks good. And we now have my Java keystore.jks, and inside there is the U2 REST server certificate and private key. So we'll go back into RESTful Web Services Developer. This time around we are going to right-click directly on the REST server properties. Same thing, click next here. I'll bring checkbox for use SSL, and we'll give it the path to this key store. Okay, we'll select the JKS file we've just created, open, and more passwords, which will all be the same for me. That makes it easier, but you don't have to do that if you want it more secure. So it's asking for key store password, which should be the JKS file password, and then the actual private key inside that password. Once you've got those right, click Finish. So that should be it. Let's hope it works. We'll start up the REST server. Give it a second. Probably have to try the call twice. Okay, so I'm just going to double click customer here. Oh, it actually worked first try. And we now see HTTPS appear in the URL, so it is secured. This is secured both from the browser client. This is just a built-in test browser in the web services developer tool here, just Eclipse based. So yeah, we've got HTTPS between that and the REST server. And if I wanted to test this in another browser, it should work too, as long as I have the root certificate in the browser's trust store. which usually wouldn't be a problem if you have a CA signed certificate. So yeah, we've got that end secured with SSL, and we've got the connection from the U2 REST server to the database secured with SSL. So I think that's it.